So today we're taking a look at the Broadway Limited HO scale Union Pacific Big Boy. And it's actually one of the most famous American steam locomotives, and its road number is 4014, which actually still runs excursion ships today. And special thanks to Broadway Limited for sending me this to review. Now this locomotive is a massive engine. This is a 4884. So 4 leading wheels, 8 driving wheels, another set of 8 driving wheels, and 4 trailing wheels. And because it's so long, it needs to be an articulated locomotive so the bogies can actually move independent from each other, so it can turn tighter curves. But yeah, let's start here in the front, where we have the smoke box painted in light gray, and it houses the smokestack on top. Then we have the number board, says X4014. Then we have a pair of class lights, and the bell actually does move. Then we have a grab iron and railings on the sides, door hinges for the smoke box, and in the front we have a platform here, and a headlight with the number on the side, and below that we have a Union Pacific 4014 badge, vents at the bottom, and an aftercooler for the air brake compressors. Then down here we have the pilot with the coupler cut lever on top, and steps on the sides. Now the cow catcher can actually open up, so if you just swivel this piece, you can rotate out a knuckle coupler. Now this one is just for display purposes. If you want to make it functional, you'll have to install this other coupler that's in the baggie. Next up on the sides we have the running boards, which go all along the boiler. On the underside we have the cylinder and the pilot truck, and then inside we have the air brake compressors, all die-cast metal, and the insides of the wheels are silver, and there's lots of piping detail, even going to the smokestack, and for some reason there's a hole on the side of the smoke box. Then we have the first set of driving wheels with the Walsh Shorts valve gear. It is very detailed, lots of different parts, and the middle of all these wheels have silver inside. And here's a view of the underframe. You can see through to the other side because there is a gap, and after each driving wheel you can see the brake shoes in between, and behind that we have this hose that droops down. Then on the side of the boiler you can see there's lots of these molded in details, rivets, panels. And in the middle of the footplate, there's actually this level difference where there is a step up towards the back, and below we have 2 air reservoir tanks and this pipe that goes to the cylinder, but there is a gap so they're not actually connected. Then over here we have the rear driving wheels, and actually the position of the valve gear is actually different from the front one, so they can move in tandem. Then in the back we have the firebox, and it's painted in light gray, and one thing I've noticed is that there's holes on the side of this, which doesn't appear to be present on the prototype, so I think these are just for sound. And at the bottom we have the fire pan instead of an ash pan because this converts to oil burning, and there also are lots of pipe detail running along the side. Then we have the trailing truck at the bottom, and it could swivel around. Then we have the cab section. In the front we have this window. It's actually kind of weird because it juts out on an angle, and there is a grab iron above it. Then we have the cab window. Inside you can see a fireman, and these windows are actually functional so you can actually slide them around. So the fireman's actually painted light gray cap, light blue shirt, and some black gloves. And under the window we have the road number 4014. Then we have information about the wheel arrangement, the size of the wheels, and the cylinder, and the weight. This is Union Pacific. Then below we have some more piping detail, and in between we have this plate to connect to the tender, which is on a hinge so it can drop down. And this locomotive is actually using Challenger's tender because it was converted to oil. And here's how far it can swivel. So now we can see the back of the cab. You can see on top the roof is curved with overhang, and there are 2 doors to access the cab, and some electrical wiring going to the tender. So in the front of the tender there is this box thing here, a ledge for the walkway with a ladder on the side, and inside we can see the port and the circuit board. Now for the side of the tender we have this angled stirrup step at the bottom, and some red lettering. It says fire hose only, and rivets going all the way across. You can see this is a straight column, while the other one's zigzag. And at the bottom we have this 2-axle truck, which can swivel around. Then further along we have this line. This is actually originally where they had the coal bunker, which now it is converted to oil instead. Then we got lettering for Union Pacific, and this tender is also a centipede tender. It has so many wheels on the sides. These ones are all fixed, and in the back we have a ladder going along the edge. Alright, so now let's go check out the back. So on top we have 2 triangular railings, light here in the middle, and marker lights on the sides, which is red in the front and green on the sides. Then in the middle we have this rear headlight, says UP, and some columns of rivets. And at the bottom you can see it says 25,000 gallons for the water capacity, and so way you could tell he's using Challenger's tender, which is 25,000 gallons, while Big Boy's original tender was 24,000. Then at the bottom we have these molded in grab irons, a knuckle coupler, a coupler cut lever, which can actually move on its own, and there's this pipe over here. Maybe it's an air brake hose. Alright, now let's go check out the other side. So this side is a bit different because they have this additional box here and some compartment doors in the front. And there's also these 2 little nubs on the sides. Let me know if you guys know what that is. And since this is the right side, we have the engineer. So he's actually wearing a blue shirt. And at the bottom we have this hand wheel on this pipe, and let's move further down this locomotive. You can check out all that detail going across, and here you can actually see the throttle rod, which actually goes all the way to the cab, makes a zigzag, and goes back to the front. This side also includes the reverser lever in the back truck right there, and it's used if you want to change the direction and go backwards. And here's a view across to the front part. So yeah, that's pretty much it on this side, and now let's go check out the top. Now I found the easiest way to hold this locomotive is holding it from the middle cylinder here and the tender, and you just grab it as one piece, and then you can position it however you want. So in the front we have this platform here, it is empty, and then inside the smokestack we have 2 funnels. There are versions with a smoke machine inside, but this one is DC stealth. Then behind we have this whistle, it's nice and shiny. There is a bar on this side, and 4 grab irons, and these molded in rivets around. Then we have 2 sand domes, and they're actually different designs. The front one has this thing in the middle, while the back one is slightly longer. And in the middle we have the steam dome, and some safety valves behind it. Moving further down, we have the dynamo to the side. This generates electricity for the lights. Then we have the housing for the blowdown separator and the steam turret. And there is a hatch on top of the cab roof, which can actually open up. Pretty cool. And then from the side, you can actually see it's held up by this stand in the back. Then let's move on to the top of the tender, where we have a hatch, and this is actually the oil bunker where they store all the fuel. And they also have this toolbox right there, and some pipes going along to the front. And right there is the oil dipstick to check the oil levels. And then in the back we have another toolbox, and 3 hatches to fill up the tender with water. The tender also curves in the middle and on the sides, and there also are railings on the roof. Now let's compare it to my Athearn Union Pacific 844. These 2 locomotives are probably among the most famous American steam locomotives, and they both run on Union Pacific excursion trains. Now these 2 models actually use different materials. Now Broadway Limited uses die-cast metal throughout the body, while Athearn uses plastic, but it does have a die-cast metal frame. You can definitely see a difference between the sheens, and this is also the glossy finish version. It does also come in a standard finish, which is more dull. So since it actually is made of metal, it does look a bit more real. Compare that with Athearn, which is plastic, so it does look a bit more plasticky. Especially if you look at the safety valves, just look how shiny and brass looking this is, while Athearn just looks like it's spray painted on. Now one advantage of having a plastic body though is that it's way easier to carry, especially the tender, which you can carry no problem, while the die-cast metal, it's like lifting a rock. It is pretty heavy, although the big boy is also a longer locomotive. And also if you compare the front, we have the brass bells. They have different levels of shine, and the Broadway Limited one actually does move, while the Athearn is just static. Also if you check out the lights, these ones are clear looking, while on Athearn they're just painted on. And now let's compare the cow catchers. Broadway Limited is more glossy looking and looks sharp, while Athearn is more dull but does have that train line hose detail. Now both engines can actually open up the pilots, so here them are with the couplers sticking out. And to close it, Athearn is kinda stiff to move, while Broadway Limited is pretty smooth and slides better. They also both come with openable roof hatches. The Athearn does have a lot more range of motion, but that's because it's missing the railing support in the back, which Broadway Limited does include, and that's more accurate to the prototype. And then from the side view, you can see the UP 844 does have larger driving wheels than the big boy. And on big boy, underneath the cab, there's just lots of details with pipes and these wires. And the distance is close together, so this plate can actually rest upon the tender. And the cab apron does lift pretty freely. But on Athearn's UP 844, it's just kind of empty looking here. There's just these 2 wires. And the cab apron is not higher than the tender, so they're the same level, which they should be closer together. And it's also pretty stiff to move. And I had no idea, but the lettering on the tenders are actually pretty different. UP 844 has a more condensed font, especially look at the O. And that's actually what they do in the real life prototypes. Another difference is the tender water filler hatches. On Athearn it's pretty smooth, but on Broadway Limited they did add this texturing pattern on top, it's like shredding detail. And compared to the GEVO, the heights are pretty much the same, probably because the same loading gauge. And then from the front, you can see the cab of the GEVO is pretty wide compared to the boiler of the big boy, but they are both Union Pacific. You can see the GEVO is much shorter than big boy, and that's not even including the tender. So the full length is roughly equivalent to a GEVO and a GP38-2. Now here's how the big boy chalk mark decal looks like, and honestly you can't really tell it's a decal from far away, and it looks pretty great, and I feel like the Marcasol definitely helped a lot dissolve it into the shape. Before it was a bit opaque looking like tape, and after Marcasol it kind of blends in. Definitely better than I was expecting. And during this time I also figured out how to add the smokestack hood. Before I thought you just plop it in the front, but that didn't seem to work, so it turns out you actually have to take out this piece first. And then you can plop it in. And that's how it looked like with the smokestack hood attached. And you can see there is a vent in the back. So for my final thoughts, the Union Pacific Big Boy is one of the greatest American steam locomotives of all time, and Broadway Limited did a pretty great job. This is a die-cast metal model, so it's quite heavy, and I love the glossy finish. It feels realistic with actual metal instead of plastic, lots of details, openable cab windows, figures, brass valves, working marker lights, and a bell that actually moves. And to be honest, when I first ran this model, I was just awestruck watching the double valve gears in action. It just looks majestic, and this model is also really huge. Definitely the biggest model train in my collection. And although this locomotive is quite complex, it actually runs pretty fine, didn't really have any issues with it, and managed to couple it with UP 844, which it does pair up with in real life. It also comes with decals for the Big Boy letters written in chalk, and they give you 3 different options. Apparently they have to rewrite the Big Boy each time. It actually looks pretty good, like you can't tell it's a decal unless you really go up close. I saw a different video where it was super obvious, and I was afraid it was gonna look like that, but it turned out to be fine. It also came with an option for a smokestack hood, which I learned it's used to protect the exhaust from blasting up and damaging the roofs of tunnels, and there's actually a video of it still being used today. Now for the cons, the glossy version does not include the builder plates on the side of the boiler and the plaque on the tender. Those details are only going to be in the standard finished version. There are also holes in the firebox which are not prototypical. I think it's just for the sound speakers, but yeah, I feel like there's a better way to do that. Now when it did open the package, this little piece fell out, and it turns out it's part of the front railing, which I did have to glue back in. And this other guy on YouTube also had the same exact issue, so it must be a weak point. But other than that, it's a pretty solid Big Boy model. A huge thanks to Broadway Limited for sponsoring this video. I definitely would not have been able to review this without their help, so I do appreciate it. Big Boy is something I've always really wanted for a long time, and I finally got one. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know down in the comment section what you guys think, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye. So during this time, I also decaled my Walther's Amfleet cars, which I had for a long time, but I never added the numbers, but it was good practice before trying it on the Big Boy. So basically you cut out 4 of the same number. You can see it does repeat in the 4 quadrants. Then you soak it in the water for a minute. Then you get microset, and you just apply this where you want the decal to be placed. And then you take out the decal from the water, and it should start sliding off. Then place the decal on the model, and you can adjust the positioning. Then roll a cotton swab to get rid of all the air, and then it should be looking like this. Next, we're going to use Microsaw. This kind of conforms the decal to the model, kind of makes it look like it's painted on, and softens the edges. So here's how the car looks like so far with the numbers. And now we're going to add in a clear coat for protection. I am using a flat finish, so it's not going to be glossy. And here's how it looks like after it's dried up. It's not exactly perfect because I am still brush painting this. And also added the number in the middle. And here's the other side. Now if you compare it before adding the flat clear coat, the decal looks way too shiny before, versus adding the flat finish. If you see it on the top one, it looks a lot more blended in. So I did it for the other one as well. It's not exactly perfect. Maybe it'll look better if I airbrush the clear coat, but finally my Amfleets have the numbers. During this video, I also realized my tank cars have really dirty wheels. You can see there is this fibery thing on the bottom. I don't know how that got attached, but if you compare it to this wheel, that's how it normally should look like. So be sure to clean your rolling stock wheels as well.
NANI?!